Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your favorite NFL podcast, post-Thanksgiving, of course, and all times throughout the year. Our bellies are full. Well, we all have eaten today, I assume. Our bellies are full. Our spirits are high. The NFL season is entering the last month and change before the playoffs, and we can only hope for good football like we finally got on Thursday night. We might briefly mention that here on another episode today, ladies and gentlemen, of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Like I said, your favorite NFL podcast going out there with your favorite troublesome triumvirate trio of chaos here. As always, leading the proceedings is myself, Iceman Jurg. Joining me at the bottom of the screen, our games master, the man, the myth, the legend, Justin. How we doing, brother?
Good. Tired.
Yeah, Justin got the deepest sleep, I think, of his entire life. I think he got a 15-hour power nap is what my headcanon of it is. I didn't actually ask him how long he did, but I think both me and Rick will agree. We're just going to assume he got like a 15-hour sleep in before waking up.
I woke up late today, for sure.
He did wake up late today, which, I mean, Justin, to be fair, I'm jealous. I wish I could, man. I wish I could. Rick does as well. As we see Billy Shakes there in the background with the Podfather. Podfather Rick, how you doing?
Well, you're jealous. I mean, I got a newborn, so, what? I want 5 hours of sleep. 15 is great, but 5, I mean, but we're getting there. We're doing all right. And yeah, he is contractually obligated to join the show based upon the fact that he won his game this week, so, and just so you know, the baby in the background is fine.
Well, I think most people watching this probably realize that babies just, tend to make noises no matter what.
If you don't know what a baby is, you shouldn't have one in the first place.
Yeah. You know what? Fair. Oh, my goodness, ladies and gentlemen. So as the intro's finished, and as you could probably see by the introduction or by the title of this video, a short and simple title, which is what, all things in sports should be, whether they be YouTube videos or articles. Keep it simple, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to discuss about in terms of one team in particular, the team that in theory should be projected to get the first overall pick this year, but they don't, because they don't have their first rounder. We will talk about the Carolina Panthers later on in this episode in some detail, because it's not been smooth, to say the very least, over in one of the great states in the Middle Eastern portion of the East Coast. Well, middle portion of the East Coast, I might as well should say that, as we get further down south. Yes, not all things are good in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we'll be talking about that very, very shortly. And we're also going to be talking about the fact that for the first time in NFL history, Monday Night Football game flex. We were going to talk about the idea of flexing games in general, but the NFL, they got our information. I don't know who leaked it. I'm looking at the eye patch wearing pirate in the background there. I think he may have had something to do with that. Or it could have been a former mascot who's jealous that he's not on this season. I don't know. We have some leaks in the camp here at the Sports.
Sienna, did you talk to the NFL or ESPN? No?
Okay. So we'll figure that out. But in all seriousness, the first ever Monday Night Football flex, we're going to be talking about that, the idea of flexing games and how much more prevalent that could be in the future, just as a general light topic of conversation, which I'm excited about. I think we don't really get to do that often enough on the show, so we're going to talk about that. But of course, before we get to the football and before we end it with the chaos, which of course another week of the hashtag SALC pick challenge and another rant podium, we must first have fun with the games. So to our games master, Justin, we started off with you. What do we got?
All right. So we're going to start with a little bit of trivia. So there have been a few safeties this year. Guys, I was wondering if you know who is the most recent. The record for the number of safeties in a season by a single player is 2. It is tied with numerous amounts of people. I was wondering if you guys could tell me who is the most recent person to have 2 safeties in a single season.
And 2 is the record, which I think, to be honest with you, is like the most obvious. If you have more than 2 safeties, something happened.
Yeah. So it's 2.
You're facing a lot of bad offenses if you're getting. Yeah, you're facing a lot of bad offenses on your schedule if you have a player that has at some point 3 safeties, which, I mean, to be fair, we've already seen one defensive record been, taken this season by a defensive player. Maybe the safeties one could be falling at some point, if not this year, maybe in a future season. So that could definitely be up for consideration. All right, let's think here.
Yeah.
Most recent player to get 2 safeties in a season. So, Rick, for me personally, the first player that it comes to mind, and it's kind of a mix of who we could talk about with. I think most people would lean first towards like the defensive line and maybe even the linebacker. So you think about the front seven first and foremost before you even consider, I think, the secondary. Whilst there are some secondary players, that may have a proponency for getting some tackles for losses, depending on like what plays are obviously drawn up. I think the first thing most people would go to would be defensive lines, and especially front four, then front seven. The first player that comes to mind, I don't know. I know he got at least one safety in a particular season. I don't remember if he got a second one that year, but it feels like he did because at one point in his career, he was never he was never held in the same regard as the best defensive players in terms of edge rushing, and he was never a defensive player of the year. But I think Carlos Dunlap had a season where he for sure got a safety and then was pretty close, if not did get a second one here semi-recently. So this is not my official first guess, but I think Carlos Dunlap, very consistent force across his entire career for good, 6, 7, 8 years in Cincinnati. I think he should be someone to consider.
Can you get half safeties? Because that would probably make more sense that he would split a safety. Like, you can split his back with somebody. Maybe he has like a safety and a half in one season. I don't know.
Maybe.
Carlos Dunlap's a good guess. I also thought of a name right away too, but I'm sure somebody more has done it more recently than him, and it's Hall of Fame semifinalist Jared Allen, probably. Because remember, he had that one season where he had, I think, 20 plus sacks.
Right.
He was a beast when it came to the defensive line. So I feel like he might be a guy. But again, it's a name that did it years ago. I'm trying to think of if there's anybody who did it a little more recently then, and I'm not 100% certain that I know of any. It's either somebody who was really good or somebody who just got really lucky.
Right.
I think. So.
Right. And it'll be interesting because Justin, I'm sure, has a couple names up on there that he'll be able to share with us. Like, I think like some people might, when they hear some of these names, they might be like, "Oh yeah, I can recognize this name," and then another one's like, "Who?" Like,
exactly. Like, a sidebar. Jeff Bezos. I just wanted you to know you're someone. An Amazon Prime truck just drove by with the door wide open. Yeah, I listen. I know. I hate Amazon, but even I know that's not kosher.
Dang it!
Yeah,
dang it, Amazon.
I'm trying to think of anybody else that I can think in my head. I'm trying to think if there's like any other like people that I can't think of anybody else. More recently than who we have.
Right. I feel like it would be those two because and then when it comes to defenses, like Rick, with trivia like this, your mind always just tries to go to what were some of the best defenses we've seen here recently, and did they have an individual that did that? So I think of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that just won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. You had a pretty good line of Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, veterans on that team, but I don't think any one of them or anyone on that defense ever got two safeties in that Super Bowl winning season in 2021. I think of then before that, you consider the no-fly zone Broncos as a very good defense. They're called a no-fly zone for a reason. There was a massive strength there with the defensive backs, but they had a more than respectable defensive front line when it came to Von Miller before he became an idiot off the field, and DeMarcus Ware of the like, as well as a young Shaq Barrett actually was on that defense, and a Danny Trevathan. So there's them, and then the Legion of Boom as well. But again, I just don't know if any guy there. Maybe did they get a safety that season? I'm sure, but did they get multiple? That same player? I don't know.
Justin, just for argument's sake, is this player, the most recent guy to do it, is he still in the league?
Let's see. I think so.
Okay.
See.
Yes, he is. Because there's a name that stuck out to me just now that I'm almost remembering the fact that this happened, because it's one of those weird stats that could happen in only a weird season. And so I'm thinking this was the COVID year. This was 2020 for the NFL. And so I feel like it was somebody on the Colts maybe, but I can't remember who was on the Colts defense that year aside from maybe one or two guys. So who was on the Colts defense in 2020? Was Shaq Leonard there yet or no?
Yeah.
He was there? But was he the guy that had two safeties?
Why the Colts?
Look, it was a very weird year in football that year. Taylor Heineke was almost won a playoff game against Tom Brady. So I'm just picking a team at random that I'm trying to think of. Like, if I was a weird NFL stat, what team would I would be a part of just for the hell of it? Maybe the Browns, maybe the Ravens, maybe the Rams. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of like who. I feel like it was the Colts specifically because I feel like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like who else was on there, but you know what? I'll get the ball rolling. I don't know if he did it or not because I feel like I saw Jared Allen do this. So, but somebody that's more recently, I'm going to say former Colts linebacker, now recent free agent, Darius Shaquille Quavenjane Wallace Leonard.
Darius Leonard is not on this list.
Okay.
See, it's tough because then my brain goes to the defensive player of the years, but I don't think any of them ever had this feat.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it was. I think it was a good player, not a guy who got lucky. Like this is not like an Eric Allen stat or an Malcolm Smith, Albert Hainsworth. It's not one of those guys,
right?
But it's somebody who was good at some point. But
still, wait, hold on. Is Jadeveon Clowney on a team this season?
He's on the Ravens.
He's on the Ravens. Yeah.
You think it could have been him, Rick? Because think about it, safety is either it could be a sack, like you were getting the QB, or you get the running back. Jadeveon Clowney, like he's had some sacks, but he's also been good for tackles for loss, like just in general.
Yeah,
a lot of different teams. And if you're talking about the guy who went first overall, who's had let's be real here, not the career first overall pick. It would just be really funny if he's one of the guys with 2 safeties in the season.
Yeah, that sounds like a good guess there.
And I think it kind of fits what you were talking about. Like, I don't think it's one of the elite of the elite, but I think it's the next tier of guy. And I think Jadeveon Clowney's career is going to be that, where he's like maybe that second, third tier of guys throughout his career. Never was one of the best definitively. So I'll say Jadeveon Clowney is my first official guess on this question.
Jadeveon Clowney is also not on the list.
Dang.
He's not one of the 18 or 19 players that have had multiple safeties in a season.
Boo!
That's unfortunate. But I think you're right. I think you're in that mold where it's guys who it's not always the tackle for loss. I'm trying to think of like other guys that might have burst through the line at some point to be just run stuffers. You think Vince Wilfork maybe, or Richard Seymour maybe?
But he said they're still in the league though.
Well, I'm trying to think of I'm in my head. I'm thinking about like guys that have done like this before. Not I know not in the league, but do you think guys like them may have been like do you think like a nose tackle maybe, like a Dexter Lawrence mold maybe?
I get what you mean. Like that archetype. Yeah, I could see that. Lawrence.
Because you're right. It's definitely front seven, but if we're thinking defensive ends, maybe it's a guy in the interior. But I'm trying to think of like who's the best nose tackle in Vita Vea, maybe?
Yeah, him, but I don't think it was him.
Because it also had you know what there's something we're not thinking about. It had to be a team that either was really unlucky on offense and turned the ball over in the red zone a bunch, or a team that had a really good punter. Because a team that had a really good punter, you down the ball inside the 5 or inside the 3 on a number of occasions, you're already set up.
So do you think – I know he's not a nose tackle. His thing is sacks, of course. 3 times. Do you think Aaron Donald could have been the guy that did do this? Or no?
Johnny Hecker's not a bad punter for this. But this is why I go back to the Colts for a second because I remember this year. I remember 2020 because I believe how good Rigoberto Sanchez was in 2020.
Right.
At downing the ball inside the 10 or inside the 5. I remember how frequently that happened. And it didn't happen often that there were safeties for the Colts, but I remember that Rigoberto Sanchez was extremely so I'm trying to think of so it wasn't Leonard. Okereke was on that team. EJ Speed was on that team.
Buckner?
DeForest Buckner was on that team.
He wasn't still on the Niners at that point?
No, he was traded. Like, he was definitely on the Colts in the pandemic season.
Justin Houston was on that team too.
Right. What's his name? Why am I forgetting him? Danico Autry?
He was there too. He was on that team also, I believe. Yeah. Was it Zaire Smith or Zaire Williams? One of those guys was there too. If you think about that defense, they had a really, really good defense for a team that went nowhere in that time frame. But DeForest Buckner's not a bad because he could have done it with the Niners too before then. You know, that's not a bad shout either. I'm hovering around the Colts of 2020 because I feel like I remembered this happening, but I don't remember where I was. But I feel like I remember reading about this or hearing about it. I'm gonna go with Justin Houston.
Justin Houston on the Colts in 2020 is the most recent example of two safeties in a season. Jared Allen was another one.
Yeah.
2008. The guy in between, 2014 New Orleans Saints, Junior Gillette.
See, that's a case where a guy got lucky, I think, because Junior Gillette's not a name that we know.
No.
The other two, Houston, sort of, but Jared Allen, absolutely. But Junior Gillette, no idea.
I forgot he was even in the league.
Yeah. How long was he even in the league? That's what I want to know.
Wow.
2010 to 2017. And that's a guy, if we're going to go down this rabbit hole, that's a guy who went to Temple and then was dismissed as a junior from Temple and then played his last year of ball at Stillman College in Alabama, in the same city as the University of Alabama, but the lesser-known college in Tuscaloosa. That's hilarious.
That sounds about right.
Junior Gillette, man. Wow.
Look at that.
That's good, though, man.
That was an outstanding trivia question.
He's on the Panthers now, right? Justin Houston's on the Panthers now, or no?
Yeah, Justin Houston, yes.
So that
you're asking me Gillette.
No,
none of us know.
Who cares what Junior Gillette is, man? I'm talking about Justin Houston.
Yes, Justin Houston is on the Panthers.
Wow. Okay. Damn. Good call there, Justin. Good call. I like that question.
Good stuff. And yet another example of the amazing brain games that Justin puts our minds through. Outstanding job as always, Justin. Do we have any more games to start the segment off, or are we done?
That's it for today.
No, we're good. It's all good. Rick.
Yes.
Do we have a mind-blowing fact of the week?
We do.
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. So this is going to be one of those facts where you're going to look at me and say, where the hell did you find this? And in the realm of where the hell did I find this, I found it on X from an account that I quasi-follow. There's been one instance, gentlemen, in the history of professional sports where on the same day, two teams played each other with the same nickname in two separate sports. September 28th, 1958 was the last date of the Major League Baseball season, and also opening day of the National Football League season. And on that day, it's September 28th, 1958, the Giants and the Cardinals faced off in two separate sports. In baseball, it was the San Francisco Giants against the St. Louis Cardinals. And in football, it was the New York Giants against the Chicago Cardinals. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, much like what happens if you had a Cardinal face a mythical Giant, didn't end well for the Redbirds on either side. In baseball, San Francisco won that game 7-2. And in football, let's just say that the Chicago Cardinals failed to show up. It was 37-7 was the final in that game. So, yes, it's one of the rare exceptions where a fact is thrown to me by fate and I appreciate that it's there. I forget the account that I saw it on, but it was a good fact to bring up. But yes, that is a paradox of equinoxes, Chevy equinoxes, actually, for that matter. But, yes, there was a date, and I don't know if it's ever going to happen again because now the baseball season ends a lot later. So it's not like that's also the other parallel too. It was the last date of one season and the first date of the other season. So that's probably never going to happen again unless somebody's season gets delayed or somebody's season gets extended. But I personally cannot wait until we have an NFL franchise named the I don't know the Maple Leafs or something, and then them in the hockey and the Maple Leafs to play on the same day and both lose because it's Canada.
Well, I'm trying to think like what multiple common names across sports can we get? Because I know like we got the Arizona and the St. Louis Cardinals, you got the New York and the Texas Rangers.
Well, the Kings.
So
Sacramento and LA. If you had a sport that had a similar nickname in both basketball and hockey, you could in theory have that happen as well. And that actually could have, I think, might have happened a few other times because I'm sure if we go through the Rolodex, there's a team that has the same nickname somewhere. But
I definitely think it's happened a lot where it's like just to happen two of the teams in the same name. But your case is where all four have it. Like I don't know if we'll get a case like that in modern sports. I think we got to add a couple more teams and get some more common names out here.
Well, yeah, that's commonality is great, for that because that's when you rid people of the idea of they can pick their own nicknames, and that's how you end up with the blobfish in certain cases. So we avoid that at all costs.
So I'm trying to think of what we need to do. Okay, all right. Clearly, we know what it needs to be. In baseball, we need to add the Wyoming Cowboys, and so that way it'll be the Wyoming Cowboys taking on the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Dallas Cowboys take on the Arizona Cardinals. And yet somehow in both games, the Cowboys lose despite being favored to win.
In theory, could you is this a cheat? If you take the Cubs and the Bears because the Cub is a bear, it's the same thing.
I get what you mean.
Is that the loophole?
Nah, that's a little bit cheating because they don't call them the Chicago. Like it's two different ones. It's the Cubs and the Bears.
That's true.
Justin, you're muted for that comment you had.
If you say Chicago Bears, you're not getting confused.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
Also, the Bears and the Cubs both winning on the same date in the last 2-3 seasons they barely win in their own right, let alone the same day.
Listen, like stranger things have happened, my friend.
I guess so. That is a perfect transition there, Rick, actually. So once again, fantastic, mind-blowing fact. I don't know how the hands of fate got that one to you, but we're glad it did.
Yep.
Glorious. Speaking of glorious, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in National Football League history, because this is a transition, ladies and gentlemen, off of Rick's last comments, something that we never would have thought would happen finally did happen. What we have been saying for so many years, especially the last couple of years, of like, hey, NFL, could we get some better games in these primetime matchups as the season goes? Well, guess what? It happened. So Monday Night Football has been flexed. Let's rewind it back a little bit first. So the original talking point of this segment, which was we could still kind of do, but just like what now with live evidence for us. We were just going to talk about what was a tweet earlier on in the week, or maybe late last week. I think it was the day after the Monday Night Football game. Adam Schefter had pointed out that for the first time ever, let me get up the exact screenshot of what was sent out. So starting next week in week 12 and for the rest of the season, Monday Night Football will have, so this was before Bears Vikings, excuse me. So he said starting next week in week 12 and for the rest of the season, Monday Night Football will have flex scheduling for the first time ever. This was the remaining schedule at that point. Bears at Vikings, which that could have been some flexing. Bengals at Jaguars for this week. Titans at Dolphins and Packers at Giants for week 14. Week 15, Chiefs at Patriots. Week 16, Ravens at 49ers, which I think we all agree that ain't moving. And then week 17, Lions at Cowboys. Again, that one ain't moving. So the last 2 weeks there, pretty safe, to say the least. It was really those first 4 weeks of games that you could have had this conversation about with the potential flexing. And realistically, also, in order for this to be flexed properly, it probably had to happen at least 2 weeks in advance. Ipso facto, we finally got this past Thursday, for the first time ever, officially, the first ever Monday Night Football flex. The NFL flexing Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce off of Monday Night Football in Week 15, replacing the December 18th Chiefs at Patriots game with Eagles at Seahawks. And just a little fun fact with that flexing decision by the NFL, that now gives the Eagles, 3 consecutive standalone games towards the end of the season here. Sunday Night Football against Dallas in Week 14, Monday Night Football against Seattle, both away games, and then Week 16 against the Giants on Christmas Day. So, guys, the first ever Monday Night Football flex has happened. And good job, finally. Good job. Of course, now let's go to the actual conversation of it so we can do this. So why is it that fans have always asked for this, and why has it not been easy to finally make this happen? Well, ladies and gentlemen, TV networks and contracts exist, and obviously there needs to be a lot of negotiating, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of favors likely done between various networks on having this caliber of game and giving it up for a game of a lesser caliber. If you were the case of whoever was originally having the Eagles Seahawks, now you have to sacrifice that, and while you do have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, it's the New England Patriots. But I mean, maybe that might still drop. Obviously, there needs to be a lot behind the scenes that goes into this. There probably is a lot that goes into this that maybe doesn't even have to pertain with football necessarily. Maybe it's just futures down the line with other cooperating network things as well. So that is way above our pay grade, and we're not really going to talk about just that. But I more so want to talk about the idea of flexing. So, Rick, I'll throw this one to you. Actually, no, Justin, I'll throw this one to you first. In regards to the fact that this game got flexed, your reaction to, I don't know if, you probably had seen the update that there was the potential for flexing. So what you thought about the idea of flexing finally being a thing now that it's finally happened? And what do you think the future of this could be? Is this something that, now that we've finally gotten it for the first time, the fans are going to be clamoring for this every single freaking week next season when we somehow get, Giants Cardinals in Monday Night Football, followed by, Browns versus Titans. Exactly. Oh God, we're torturing people. But when we inevitably get that for back-to-back primetime games next season, which good Lord, I will laugh if that comes true. Fans are going to be clamoring for it, Justin. So the idea of flexing, that it's finally happened, and what the future, how often can fans realistically expect this to happen? Because I don't think, this is just my perspective, I don't think the networks are going to be too keen on making this a very consistent thing going into future seasons.
No, I can't imagine it's something that most networks are actually all that thrilled about. I mean, when you promise a network that you're going to get Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and because the matchup is so poor, now you're flexing into a different market. I'm sure that it's something that is done with great caution. Because, again, you don't want to screw up any of these TV contracts. That's what it's all about. It's all about the money for the NFL. It's a business. I get it. I don't expect to see it too often. Unfortunately for the Patriots, they are just awful this season. Just ask your Bill Peppers. He'll tell you that they're not very good this year. And it was the right move for this situation. I mean, this is a much better game. They chose a team with arguably the biggest market in the not Dallas Cowboys. It's this, what's the game? The Seahawks and the
Seahawks Eagles got flexed in.
Philadelphia is another humongous market. And listen, Seattle put on a show this week, so it should be a premium matchup. It should be a great game. I don't expect to see it very often. Like I said, it's going to depend on the markets and things like that. If you have two bad teams, if you have the Jets, for example, playing, I don't know, what's another bad team in a big market? I guess New England. If it was a Jets-New England game, they're not flexing that out. New York and Boston are two of the largest markets. You're going to get great ratings. They don't care about the quality of game. This is about ratings, and they'll have the same, if not bigger, ratings with Philly and Seattle as opposed to a bad New England team and Kansas City.
I mean, you guys are also forgetting one very important fact about this too. You're not only flexing out of Mahomes and Kelce, you're flexing out of Taylor Swift, obviously. But this is what I will say too. Wouldn't this have been fun last year? Because what was Justin aside from getting Matt Rule fired, what was he the main proponent of last year in football? Why are the Denver Broncos on every primetime game? because they were awful. So this would have been great last year too. There's two things that I think about this. A rambunctious person at Podfather Judas put out earlier in this season, flex out the Sunday Night Football game. It was Chargers and Bears because it was two horrible coaches. Fine. So from a NFL standpoint, I understand your point, but let me take you back a little bit to a mind-blowing fact that I had weeks ago. Remember when we said FDR moved Thanksgiving and the calendar makers were annoyed because Thanksgiving was printed out properly? The venues that have these schedules, that have these tour dates, that have all this already set up, it hurts them too because if you get flexed out of a Sunday night game to a Monday night game, I know it's hard. I know it's probably not going to happen, but you could lose that date for something you've already paid for. And I understand that NFL rules all and NFL is king. Number two, you're going to tell these stadium workers that, your Saturday game got bumped to a Sunday night game, or your Sunday game got bumped to a Monday night game. Sorry, you got to come in and work. And if they can't do that on a moment's notice for coverage, that's going to hurt their pockets. That's going to hurt covering and finding that popcorn vendor from Section 312 who needs a replacement. It's just different in a way. So that's why I don't think you can do this every single time, because what eventually is going to happen, this opened up Pandora's box in a way, because literally you're going to say every game can be flexed out potentially. So you're relying on the year to year of knowing the draw of some of these teams. This isn't college basketball where Kansas versus UConn is always going to headline a tournament because those two are storied programs. These teams have bad years and down years, and you don't know that until you start playing the games. In college, it's different because college, the programs that are there, and basically that every year by hook, by crook, or by cheating, Jim Harbaugh, you're going to have the same teams be as good as they are year in and year out. But in the NFL, it's different because of the injuries. Like the Kansas City New England game on paper, take away the records and take away all of that, you have Mahomes and Kelsey against one of the more storied franchises of the last 25 years in New England. So that on paper is a good draw. The Patriots are just awful this year. But to your point, Browns-Titans on paper is a horrible game. But if they're both 7-2, and that's the game you have going on. Remember a couple years ago that Arizona-Buffalo game where Arizona was like 9-2 and Buffalo was 8-3? That game would have been perfect for a Sunday night, Monday night game because while you don't think about that matchup on paper, the results allowed it to be flexed. So there's pros and cons to it. But I agree with Justin. You are not going to be able to do this every time. And now that you've done it once, you've opened up that conversation to, well, this game should be flexed because this is a bigger game. Because last year, this was a bigger game. Well, I'm sure people thought Jets-Jacksonville would have been a good game last year for Thursday Night Football if it was played in a damn hurricane. So, if that had been flexed to save the people from going in the driving rainstorm, we'd all be happier. But, it really is a question of who's really on top of the pyramid here. Is it the NFL? Is it the networks? Is it the venues? Is it the teams, the players? All these entities are jockeying for top position in that pyramid. And so now you've opened up that door. God help you, because you're going to be asked about this week in and week out.
Absolutely. And this is going to be something that is going to be brought up about a lot going forward. And, now that it's happened for the first time, you've now allowed this to enter into the mainstream media. Of course, people like us, people have been podcasting and saying in videos on YouTube for years that flexing of these primetime games should exist. This is the thing, right? But I think now the way more intriguing aspect of it is, like you said, Rick, now you're opening this up to mainstream media. Will this be talked about next season when we're 4 weeks in and the week 5 matchup is not week 5, let's say the week 7 matchup, we already can tell is an absolute dud because two teams are playing terribly right now. Is it going to be a segment on First Things First or on SportsCenter where they're going to ask about should the NFL look to flexing this game out? You're now opening that up. And like you guys have already talked about, you're mentioning it with the venues now, Rick. Justin talking about things with the TV network contracts. How does this effect with the sponsorships. You have to. I mean, I think they're getting lucky here because from New England being the home team to, I guess now the home team is technically Seattle here. There's a little bit of a difference, I think, in some of the sponsoring on that one. Granted, Philadelphia is still involved, so you get still some Northeast in there. Maybe that doesn't affect things too much, but I think if you're flexing out a game, like you mentioned it perfectly, for example, if you have a game that is, and I know this is big, it's primetime television, and maybe it just doesn't matter at the end of the day because it's still the franchise of Monday Night Football that brings all the eyes to it for the sponsors. So maybe the sponsors may not, it may not be the most important thing in this, but I still think that's something to take into account. And like you mentioned very like towards the end there, Rick, the teams and the players, like as much as we bemoan the way they schedule it, every single team needs to have at least one primetime game per season. Now, this happening later in the year is a little bit different because we've already had the Chiefs in primetime, right? Obviously, and we've already had the Patriots have at least one primetime game, unfortunately. Now, once we get to next season, if fans are going to be clamoring in week 3 to change a game in week 6 and neither team has had that primetime game yet, this is a different conversation. You're talking about two teams that why would they want this primetime slot taken away from them with the potential that they could get a big win on primetime to turn their season around? And with the changing in the scheduling, this now affects the way that the team needs to practice slightly more, just slightly. Again, we're not talking about as of now, we're not talking about turning a Thursday night game into going to a Sunday game. I know we're not talking about that, but you not let this happen, but you do this now this one time. These conversations, these ideas are going to seep into the dialogue if you're the NFL. And I think this just brings so many levels to this that I'm with you too. Ultimately, this is not going to be something that is going to happen consistently throughout like future seasons. I don't think like fans, I'm just saying this, fans, don't get your hopes up for this. Like this is not going to be a constant thing. Like we're not going to get this happening 3, 4, 5 times in a season. I say the most that happens, tie back to Justin's safety question. The record is 2 in a season. This might happen twice at most in a season. It's not going to happen more than that. I just think there's way too many things that we've already discussed here that make it just too complex and too interwoven that we're going to see this too often.
There's 2 points that I want to make too before Justin. I know you want to say something too, and I know that you want to, but there's 2 points I want to jump in here too. One, we talk about how the fans might be clamoring for this. Well, those aren't the fans that have season tickets that have spent a ton of money to go to the games on the date that it says and can't change because X, Y, or Z. So they can't do that. So those are the fans you're losing. It's just the wonky social media fans who are streaming the games, who are not going to be at the seats in Chicago in the minus 10 degree weather in January to watch their team play. Yep. But number 2, the NFL did this with Week 18, where it's all flex. They're the only league, I think, still that has a week of the season where there was the games you don't know what the times are going to be until that week. Yeah. They're the only pro sports team that I know. And so if you're going to do that, then the question is going to be, well, let's flex week 17 as well. And then it's going to be flex week 16 and week 15. And then you go back and forward from there. So that also opened up Pandora's box a little bit too. Right. It's good that you do that because you don't want the terrible 2-9 versus 3-10 teams playing the Sunday night game because there's nothing on the line there. But you open it up to a lot more than that. So I'll step out because I know Justin had something to say, so I'll step out.
So 2 points. One, this is actually the first year where you're no longer required to have a primetime game as a team. That's something they announced earlier in the season, so they're not going to have to worry about that. But that being said, they're also there's no other opportunities. This was the last opportunity they actually had to do this. If you looked at the schedule, this was week 15.
Yeah.
Week 16 is the Christmas Day games. Week 17, there is no Monday night game because of New Year's Eve. And then week 17, there's never a Monday night game. So this is the only one that's going to happen this season. And you're right. We'll be lucky if we see it next season. I don't think it's going to be something that happens that often. I mean, even if they end up being 1-8 at some point, if a network pays to have the Dallas Cowboys as a Monday night game, they're not flexing out of the Dallas Cowboys. Right. So we'll see that the NFL is changing their scheduling to try and rectify this. Unfortunately, they have not had very much luck this year, especially putting the Jets in 6 primetime games and their quarterback gets hurt in the 4th play of the game, the first game of the year. But it's not something that I'm going to.
And that is the prime example right there. You plan for it all season long, and 4 plays in, the top money draw out with an Achilles and gone, maybe until Christmas Eve if he decides he wants to try and play in that game for peanuts and Cracker Jack and whatever. but you're played the hand you're dealt. You can't just play God with the schedule because you're hurting your bottom line, which is the fans, the players, the development, the venues. Like, what's going to happen if in a couple of years they try this and a venue pushes back and says, well, I'm sorry, but that night we have a Pearl Jam concert. So that's been booked in for a year and a half. We're not changing the tour date. So what are you going to do? Go play at the minor league baseball stadium? Like, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about that. So this is kind of where, is the NFL king? I get it if you're talking revenue, but that doesn't allay. Roger Goodell's not the president of the United States. It doesn't allay the fact that, like, you could just trample on whatever and make it. Imagine if the NFL was like Mortal Engines, like that. Like they were just the city of London just eating up every city they could. Like, it's not going to be fun at the end of the day because you literally are going to see your ticket and it's going to say game at Sunday 1:00, scratch Sunday 4:00, scratch Sunday 8:00, scratch Saturday at 4:25 because all the teams are terrible, and now because college football's done, you have that flex scheduling too.
Right.
So, it's just too much.
Yeah, I will say there's just like two things for it. One, when you bring up Week 18, Rick, I think the one thing that kind of lets them get away with that is just it's all one day. All 16 games are one day. I think that's the only reason why Week 18 they could get away with that, because you can plan around you can plan around being there on Sunday. It's just the time that's going to be decided. And also, then, to be fair, I think they gave us the times for all those games, I want to say at least 2-3 days in advance. So Week 18 is an exception to the rule because every single game is one day. Unless barring a complete utter catastrophe like a stadium having pipes collapse in on itself. So maybe try not to have the Week 18 game in Washington. You try to avoid that. And, to Justin, you mentioning that while it's not a letter of the law anymore, Justin, with the requirement, I still think teams are going to complain about that if they do get flexed down. They haven't had one yet. That would just be my thing where it's like, yes, in theory, it's not required anymore. But best believe the teams will raise a stink. And then you have to think about the NFL. Roger Goodell, while we always do say at the end of the day when it comes to these ownership meetings, it's like Roger Goodell doesn't necessarily need to be cool with all 32 owners. He definitely for sure is not. You need to at least keep some people on your good side. And if you cross one person, that could become a domino effect to where something that you want to pass no longer gets passed. Or when it comes to your future as the commissioner, it could be in question. Now, I think this is different when it comes to him in particular, because I think Roger Goodell has kind of noted about the fact that he recently got his contract extended earlier this season. This might be his last extension. I think he's even hinted that he's not going to be the commissioner for too much longer. This isn't a Supreme Court justice here where he could just serve for life. I don't think he wants to do that either. But in the same idea, when it comes to the next commissioner, whoever that dude might be, he needs to make these relationships early. And if you flex someone off and they haven't had prime time yet, it may not be required, but you may have just made an enemy of that person for the rest of your time as the commissioner. And that's not something that you want to risk. So I think, again, I think this is a very much a constellations, the planets have aligned perfectly for this to happen. I think that's what the case is. I don't think we could get used to this, like Rick has detailed, and like you've mentioned, Justin, as Taylor Swift is there. Just wait until an NFL game and a Taylor Swift concert end up having to be in. That's where everything kicks up. But no, in all seriousness, NFL fans, this might be it's sweet to see this one time. This might be maybe a chance to only time it happens. I think we also need to open that possibility. Yes, it's happened. This might be a once in a lifetime occurrence, and we gotta. You gotta just accept it. Like Haley's Comet, once every 1,000 years or whatever it is. We may not see this ever again.
Again, you also have to understand, that if your team is 1-10, David Tepper, you're not gonna be warranted to have a primetime game.
Yeah, or you had it super early in the season.
Yeah.
Transition in the business, ladies and gentlemen. As the title of this episode goes, as the title on the ticker goes, the tumultuous tenure of Tepper. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the Carolina Panthers are so not good. Aside from being an absolute stick in the heart for me and Justin, who had high hopes of them going into the season.
I warned you.
The Carolina Panthers fans and that franchise just in shambles right now because of what has been a really, really bad 2023 season. And there's plenty to unpack with this. So Frank Reich was fired earlier this week, ladies and gentlemen. Less than a full season into his tenure, becomes the first ever head coach to get fired in back-to-back seasons. Poor guy. I think there have been worse coaches this could have happened to, but it just goes to show that those guys didn't get rehired quickly enough, whereas Frank Reich did. So Frank Reich getting fired now by the Carolina Panthers after a 1-10 start to a season that, even unrealistic standards by some aside, granted, winning the NFC South at a 7-10 record could have actually been realistic, which actually still is funny enough. There's still a chance. But, the memes and jokes aside, things have not been good in Carolina. And despite the fact that Frank Reich and I think his offensive coordinator as well have been fired, I think a lot of that coaching staff has already been let go for the most. It's just the interim head coach is the special teams coordinator who's taking over for the remainder of the season. It's not been good, to say the very least. So while Frank Reich being fired and, you're going to hope for that new coach energy, at least in the short term here in this week, let's be realistic here, guys. It doesn't start at Frank Reich's firing. The issues don't start at his hiring either. It starts at the top of this. And you are now talking about a guy who is one of the newer owners in the NFL here. Obviously not the newest anymore. Been a bit since that. But one of the semi-new, when you consider things, he took over in 2018 after the departure of Jerry Richardson, forcibly, realistically, Dave Tepper. And since he is taking over in 2018, the Carolina Panthers have been way below any sort of good standards of football, to say the very least. I don't think they've made the postseason since he's taken over there, and they've had a lot of different things happen on that team in terms of constantly shifting guys around in terms of the structure at some of the most important positions. GM is one of them that we could talk about, which this GM, I'd be shocked if he still has his job at the end of the season, but especially at head coach and quarterback. And this is where I think the conversation starts here, boys. So Rick, I'll throw this to you first just to speak about the issues, but this is just the backdrop of how tenuous it's been there with Carolina. The Carolina Panthers, since he has taken over, since David Tepper took over as the owner, have had 3 proper head coaches and then 3 interim head coaches. So every single head coach firing that has happened in season for this franchise, which kind of speaks to a lot of things when you always just decide to pull the trigger in season when it comes to that. But I think the host of quarterbacks has been the bigger conversation. So these have been the guys who have been more significant starting QBs just in terms of passing yards, touchdowns, starts, etc. for this team over since 2018. So you had Cam Newton, right? It was the very end of his years there in Carolina. You had Kyle Hallen. You had Taylor Heineke. You had Teddy Two Gloves Bridgewater. Oh, what a glorious man. You had PJ, should have been XFL MVP Walker, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and now Bryce Young. 8 supremely significant guys in terms of all the stats that I've mentioned before. And then 3 other guys, so I just want to mention, mainly the first 2 for fun, Will Grier and Jacob Eason. Will Grier was at least a former pick of this organization in the Tepper's time. And also a guy who they signed this past offseason, Andy Dalton, played a couple, he started 2 games, I think, this season, if I'm not mistaken. So you've had, that's 11 quarterbacks who have seen the field in some way, shape, or form since he became the guy. Like I said, 3 main head coaches, 3 interim head coaches now. And I think, this general manager, the current Panthers GM, name escapes me at the moment, he has not been there the whole time. I think he was only recently hired in either the pandemic season or maybe 2021. So you've had at least 2 general managers there as well. This constant change is not good. And I mean, me saying this, GM should also be fired. Dude hasn't done that great of a job. But let's look at this. Rick, I'll throw it to you. Complete dysfunction, tumultuous, terrible, troublesome. We could throw so many different words that rhyme with the letter T that I could rhyme with the alliteration there. But the Panthers have been a mess. So the conversation we're about to have here for the next little bit before we get to the hashtag SAOC pick challenge is just simply this. What are the steps? Note heavily the word steps, because this is not a one draft. This is not a one-off season. This is not a one-time thing. One thing will fix all. This is not what that is. There needs to be a full change to the Carolina Panthers. Rick, how the heck can they even start doing that?
So let me first clean up some facts here as well. Garrett Gilbert was also a starting quarterback for the Panthers at one point in his career, so there's that. The Panthers have been owned by David Tepper since 2018. Since that time, they've gone 30 and I think 63 or 30 and 64, something along those lines. This is also a team that lost their core heart piece, Luke Kuechly, in 2019 because he retired after that season. The coaching staff is still there. Reich was the only one that left. Thomas Brown is still the offensive coordinator, but Jim Caldwell, who's a senior assistant, is helping him draw plays. And Dom Capers is still a senior assistant on defense to Ejiro Evero. Now, the thing about those 2 guys is that they have had coaching experience. So does Chris Tabor, but only 1 game because that was the game in 2021 where Matt Nagy had COVID and Tabor coached the Bears to an 11-point loss to the Niners. So not a lot of experience there. The GM, Scott Fitterer, 2021 he started. He was the Seahawks VP of operations in 2020, but he was a Seahawks guy through and through. So to answer your question, what are the steps? There aren't any. And I'll tell you why there aren't any. Because David Tepper is the end-all and be-all. Unfortunately, that is how he's decided to run things. You even heard it in that press conference this week when they fired Frank Reich. The decision to take Bryce Young could have been, Reich and Fitterer and all those guys saying, we want CJ Stroud. But if Tepper said, nah, we're taking Bryce Young, they would have taken Bryce Young. Basically, my word is law. And I'm going to walk to the ring like this, lose my headphones like Vincent Kennedy McMahon, because I'm God in Carolina, and that's how it goes. How does Carolina get better from here? They don't have the number 1 overall pick, which they were probably going to have, but they don't have it. So you gotta work with what you got, and you have to bring in a guy who is going to play by the rules, and also a guy who, unfortunately, this is what happens when you have hedge fund managers who become football owners. They want quick fixes. Football is not a game where you can have a quick fix. Look at Zach Taylor. How many years in Cincinnati did Zach Taylor have before he finally got it right and they went to the Super Bowl? It was like 4 or 5. And he was a top coordinator name. He was like 30 when he took over. And it didn't happen right away. But Cincinnati gave him the leeway to get things done. And he eventually got them into a spot where now, I know Burrow's hurt this year, but now Cincinnati is a player in the AFC constantly. There's a lot of other teams that are around. Look at them. If they go through struggles, they find ways to work through and get better. But David Tepper is a guy, a hedge fund guy, a Goldman Sachs guy who wants the quick fix now, who wants to immediately turn the profit now, and that's never going to happen. So unfortunately, this Panthers franchise is in a lot of trouble, and I cannot foresee a big-name head coach wanting to go there because they will be at odds. And also, for that matter, I can't see a first-time head coach wanting to go there because you're going to be the minnow in David Tepper's pool, essentially. Like, Ejiro Evero would be a phenomenal head coach for this franchise, but I doubt he wants it.
Yeah.
Thomas Brown is 32. Maybe he could be good, or Parks Frazier's 32. But when they're young, they could be good head coaches if they're given the leeway, but they're never going to get the leeway because, and Scott Fitterer, he could be a good general manager, but if there's too much meddling from the top and you can't do your job, then you're never going to be given that chance. So the real step would be that Carolina needs to get new ownership. That's never going to happen. So until that time happens, boys, for the next however many years, you have to stop the Panthers at the bottom of the division.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have to.
And before I throw it to you, Justin, just like the big thing you pointed out that had you not, I think one of us would have done so. It's like the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young pick wasn't made by the GM, wasn't made by the head coach. The final pick was made by the owner. And what have we always talked about here? When you have a extremely hands-on, meddlesome owner, that just does not bode well for your franchise across all sports. All sports, the guys that just try too hard, it struggles. Look what happens, Rick. You mentioned this set of owners so many times, the Pagula family. They've been more hands-off on the Buffalo Bills since, let's say 2015-16, and more hands-on with the Sabres. Which franchise has struggled more in that span of time? I'll give you a hint. It's not the football one. Granted, it's been a bad year for them this year, but overall, it tends to be, the team where you're more hands-on. I think James Dolan is the perfect example of this.
He is.
New York Knicks, super hands-on. New York Rangers, yeah, I own them too. Who's been the most successful New York team for the last 15 years? The one that he has had the least amount of possible influence on in terms of being supremely hands-on with everything. Like Tepper, like you said, he didn't let the football guys do their thing, because what did we say in our analysis going into this past mock draft? And I know I tend to say this when we pat ourselves on the back, as a joke and stuff, but no, in all seriousness, CJ Stroud fit the archetype for what Frank Reich wanted more. And the owner just completely said, nope. Don't care about your system. Don't care about your schemes. Don't care about who you want. You're taking this guy and you're making it work. Damn, does that not sound like an owner who only recently got finally exiled out the league here? Dan Snyder did the same thing in Washington.
Yeah.
David Tepper must be thankful that this team is called the Panthers and not something else that would cause, more problems, because we'd probably get a situation like that brewing here too.
And it also doesn't help that this is a team that is struggled so mightily on the offensive line this year. Ike Ekwonu has taken a massive step back, but Look at their draft. Look at what they had to work with this year. They traded the number 1 pick and a second rounder to the Bears for, the number 1 pick, but, it was the 9th or the 1. They traded away a 3rd rounder and a 6th rounder in the Stephon Gilmore deal. How well has that worked out? And, let's not forget that 2nd round pick that they had was from San Francisco in the Christian McCaffrey trade. How much different would this team look if it was C.J. Stroud, Christian McCaffrey, and a better offensive line that you built through the draft or built in free agency? They would probably be where you guys want them to be, which is top of the division right now, because this division is ripe for the winning for 3 teams, but not Carolina, because of cruel mismanagement from top down.
Yep, complete, utter mismanagement. And last thing I'll say before Justin gives his piece on it, the coordinators that you mentioned that maybe they'll get a shot, Rick. Does this kill any chance these guys have being coaches for the next at least 3 to 5 years? Because think about it. If you are supposed to, and I'm being serious here, because when you have your name circling around in the rumors for a bit of time and you have one bad season, that can cost you. Look what happened in Tampa Bay to former offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich. Dude was looking real good after that Super Bowl win, and one down season, which realistically I don't think is fully on him. I think there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that we're really not privy to between Bruce Arians and Brady and the management group ownership and all that. And he gets caught in the crossfire. And this went from a guy who, he's going to be getting head coaching interviews for 3 more years to not even being an offensive. I think he's on the Rams coaching staff this year, right? Or
he is, but another big name too, just like you mentioned, Terrell Austin.
Yep.
Years ago, Lions D coordinator was the hot young name coming out. You're going to be the next head coach. Never happened because you were the coordinator for the Lions. But now he's with the Steelers. He's the DC for the Steelers. And he's doing really well.
What's happening in Pittsburgh?
Really well.
And this is a guy who you mentioned, a young offensive coordinator getting a first chance here now. Well, especially, the issues between him and Frank Reich on who was technically doing the play calling, which Frank Reich, a screen on your final play as offensive play caller. Not great. And then Evero being the DC who he was the DC of the Broncos for so many years when the only respectable part of that team was the defense. Vance Joseph, it took 8 games into this season before he could finally get that defense doing something. And I'm still not giving him credit because we've seen Vance Joseph as both a head coach and a DC. It ain't good. Evero's reputation, he's never going to – I don't know if he'll even get a chance to be the head coach anymore after this, ever. Maybe a DC somewhere, but he's probably going to have to go somewhere and be a linebackers coach for a year. I'm saying stuff like this affects – we're talking about how it affects, Bryce Young, how it affects now Frank Reich. This is going to affect these guys' careers for a period of time. And I'm being serious when I say this. Another guy, Rick, Raheem Morris, a guy who after his head coaching tenure was a defensive coordinator for a bit, was being told that offense is the way to go, became an offensive coordinator for a bit, and then went back to being a defensive coordinator. And I'm not saying Raheem Morris was big gangbusters as a head coach. Certainly not. I'm not saying, necessarily he would do great in his next stint as a head coach. But you're telling me a guy like that doesn't get at least legitimate circulation for at least 7-8 years since he's been one? I mean, come on now. That's absurdly ridiculous. This is what David Tepper has done. He has ruined reputations. He's ruined guys' career. I don't want. We need to let this play out. So I don't want to go too far. But this is the potential harm that it has done because this guy just thinks he can do whatever the heck he wants. And yes, I understand as an owner. Yes, it belongs to you. You don't know what you're doing. No. Here's a fun fact. The owners of these sports teams don't know how to build winning sports teams. They're not the ones making the trades. They're not the ones doing all the details. It's not always the main GM doing everything. It's sometimes the assistant general managers that do a lot of the legwork and communicating with the agents and stuff like that. This is people who have nothing to do with the money at the top. This guy somehow thinks he can do it. Like you said, he thinks just like in financing, he could do one quick thing for a quick fix. No. Not at all. And he's already tried to do that if we're talking off the field here when it comes to the stadium situation, like even the practice facility with the Panthers. And I know he's also owner of the MLS team in North Carolina as well. Excuse me. I'm not an MLS fan, so I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. I'd be wholly out of my realm on that. I think on the field they're decent, but again, off the field, this guy thinks that he knows everything. When are we going to accept the fact that billionaires are just kind of dumb sometimes? It's this guy doesn't really know what the hell he's doing. And yet he's somehow the person that gets the final decision made. No, dude, that's not how it works. That's really not how it works. The kids of former owners screw this up. You think you're just going to walk in with a magic wand and fix everything? Not at all. So I'm with you. Like, I only asked the question because, like, there, in some way, shape, or form, Carolina has to be good again at some point. Now, maybe that could be in the year 2040. Maybe we're a long way from that. But at some point, there needs to be a turnaround. I'm kind of with you, Rick. Like, I just don't see how it happens. Now, Justin, please tell us how in 2024 they're going to shock the world and win the division. No, I'm joking. But your thoughts about the situation as a whole, of course.
Well, a little magic dust, and you get it.
So, look, the offense hasn't performed the way that they hoped it would. I mean, they brought in a quarterback guy who brought in his quarterback guys. And let's face it, I mean, Bryce Young has been a disappointment so far this season. Now, if you really look and take a deep dive into his stats, you may say, hey, there's plenty of quarterbacks that have had this kind of slow start. I mean, I remember looking, they were comparing his numbers to Trevor Lawrence, who was just a couple of years ago in his first year with a mistake head coach signing. And he turned out fine. It's very possible that this is an overreaction from Dave Tepper, but they didn't seem to have the right coaching staff in place at the moment. I mean, for as much as I've tooted Frank Reich's horn and said that he's a good coach, the issues were on offense, really. So it did not look like Bryce Young was developing. It did not look like he was moving in the right direction. And if you're an owner, I'm not wasting time with a rookie quarterback. If it's his first season, if he's moving backwards, all right, I'll take your word for it. We'll see what we can do about getting the right person in. Now, it is your job and only job to get the right people in and then have them manage the franchise. So if something happens, and you're firing guys, I don't know, once a year, like another franchise that I've seen, Houston, then there's an issue, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're going to be terrible next year, but they have to find someone that's going to come in and they're going to fix their scheme completely. I mean, Adam Thielen has been very good for them. He's not great. He's not a number one receiver. He was falling off number two receiver when he was having all those injuries in Minnesota. That's why they moved on from him. They need to go out there and they need to get a number one receiver. It's going to suck that they don't have a first round pick this year, especially since it's probably going to be the number one overall pick in the draft. And they could have used that to recoup a number of different assets to try and fix this offense. But yeah, I don't think there's a 1 year fix. I think the offensive line is going to need to be fixed as soon as possible. That's really where it's going to have to start. And then you're going to have to get someone that's going to come in and run the right system for Bryce Young. Put him in spots that he's comfortable in. Forget about easy quarterback throws. Bryce Young is not necessarily your stereotypical quarterback. He doesn't have the height. He doesn't have the I guess, playmaking ability that you were looking for when people drafted like CJ Stroud, for example. But he's got skills. And you need to get him back to his basics and back to what made him the number one overall pick and a Heisman winner and a national champion in Alabama. And it's up to Dave Tepper to find that guy.
Yeah, and I will say this, when it comes to Bryce Young and him just being completely caught in these crossfires, like, I don't know, at least for me, maybe I'm just being nicer to the kid than most. I'm just personally going to DNF the rest of his season, like, you DNF in an F1 race. Like, I cannot give him a grade for the rest of the season because the dude has been put in an impossible situation with he was with a head coach that didn't plan to want him or have him at the start, a offensive receiving core that has been, I think, the most disappointing in the league in terms of multiple former first round picks or second round picks in that receiving core that have just accomplished, jack all in their NFL careers.
Yep.
And nothing aside from, like you said, old man Adam Thielen, and old in terms of NFL age, has been his most reliable weapon. I can't say that he doesn't have that playmaking ability, because I don't think, like, we've seen quarterbacks in unfair situations, but there's at least one redeemable thing.
Right.
What's his redeemable thing? What's the redeemable thing for him? The
if you
offensive
don't-
line is garbage. The skill position is lackluster, worse than I think we all would have imagined. The head coach didn't want him. Like, let's just be real here. I'm not saying Frank Reich didn't try to help him, but the head coach didn't want him. I think I think that plays in the back
I
of the
saw
mind.
that that's not true, by the way. I mean, there was multiple reports at the beginning of the season, even coming from Frank Reich. When they walked into the office, they said they came to their own conclusions, and then they got together. Everyone was on the same page. All those reports that are coming out that said that Dave Tepper was the one that made the final decision and the GM and coach had nothing to do with it, that's incorrect. They're saying now that everyone was on the same page with Bryce Young. They were saying that in the beginning of the season, and they were saying it now. Whatever report came out, that was just slander.
Well, let me also say this too. I'm going to crystal ball this into the future here. Fortunately for the Panthers, the first round this year probably won't be that offensive line heavy. So even though they lost that first pick to the Bears, they'll probably be okay. But let me ask you this question. You think Brian Burns still wants to be in Carolina? Because he's coming up to the end of his 5th year with the Panthers. They picked up the option. They haven't done a new contract for him. He's not going to want to stay. So who's going to be the anchor on your defense if Brian Burns is gone? Jamie Robinson? Shai Tuttle? Like, you guys say there's pieces here for next year, and I agree with you, there are, but if the offensive line is where you need to go, and they desperately need to get the offensive line better, you got to make a sacrifice. Hey, Tepper, this is business. You got to sacrifice one to make the other stronger. Unfortunately, you got a really good linebacker in Brian Burns, who, if memory serves, you could have traded for a couple number ones, and you didn't do it.
Each of the last 2 deadlines,
and you didn't do it. Now you're going to see him walk because he's not staying in Carolina unless you throw all the money you have at him. And if you do that, you're not solving the other problems that you have.
Well, we also, when they were a team that was still in the race at the end of last year, no matter how many quarterbacks issues they had, no matter how many, games that they were giving away, what was their bread and butter? I'll tell you right now, it was the run game. And the run game for them is non-existent this year. I mean, Miles Sanders has not been great. I couldn't even tell you who the rest of the running backs are
Hubbard.
at this point. Chuba Hubbard.
Hubbard's still there.
And is there another player there? They can't seem to get any of their other receivers involved. Adam Thielen is averaging like 15 catches a game, which is great for Adam Thielen. But to have 15 catches and 50 yards a game is not good.
Nope.
I know he's got a few touchdowns. He's had a good season, but I'm not trying to take anything away from Adam Thielen, no matter how it might sound this segment. But they've gotten away from what they did best last year. And I know it's a new regime, and that's what happens. But you took a team that was, what were they, 7-10 last year?
Yep.
With a good run game and a chance to make the playoffs, and really what seemed like could be a quarterback and a couple of wide receivers away, and you've completely changed not only the defense, which is not as good as it was last year, but the offense and everything that they did positively. To put a quarterback in what is a broken system, no matter what quarterback it is, it's not going to work out. I don't care if you're doing Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. If you're putting them in that system, and there's no run game, and there's only one receiver, and the offensive line is not playing well, they're not going to play well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm saying what I'm saying about for Bryce Young in particular. He had no chance of success with this team.
How many quarterbacks do you see come in and light it up first season? I mean, even Mahomes sat.
Yeah.
He didn't play. There's Peyton Manning is one of the most iconic quarterbacks of all time. I think he had more interceptions than touchdowns his first year.
Yes, he did.
Would they win 3 games that year?
Yep.
He for sure did. But Justin, this ties back to Tepper thinking that one move can fix everything.
I'm not sitting here singing the praises of Dave Tepper. I
know that. But
No one is. No one should.
I'm saying that there was plenty to blame Frank Reich for, is what I'm saying. And it got to the point where, as a business decision, it was clear. I mean, in my mind, even if it was only the first year, and maybe he could have turned it around next year. But in terms of this year, when you traded away a hell of a lot to take a number 1 quarterback and a guy that was as highly touted as Bryce Young, forget all the intangibles that he didn't have and the height and the whatever. things were moving in the wrong direction. And it was clear in terms of this year that they did not have the right people to implement the correct systems to get a job done.
It just proves a point, though. To me, it just proves a point, though, that you and Joe, you're gonna be serious. I'm gonna be hilarious for a second.
Which again is a Dave Tepper issue. It's his job to bring in the right people.
You gotta watch this show and you gotta watch us talk, because who's the one that tells you Alabama quarterbacks never do well, and who's the one that says never pick an Alabama guy in the first round? Hi, right here. If you listen and pick C.J. Stroud, maybe you'd be better. Maybe not, but maybe you'd be better. You'd have 3 wins instead of 1.
Well, did you see the C.J. Stroud report that came out this week? There was a team that was very conflicted.
Justin, I got a 5-week-old. What report are you talking about?
there was a team that was supposedly very torn on whether or not they wanted to take C.J. Stroud, and the GM was pushing and said, "This is the guy, and we want him, and let's trade for him, and we can really get something for him." And the head coach said, "Nope, we're starting Jimmy Garoppolo."
Which, to be fair, Aiden O'Connell has outperformed Garoppolo dramatically.
It's not bad. Aiden O'Connell's not been bad. I'm not. That's not a dig on Aiden O'Connell at all. But I mean, you look.
Yeah, but he hasn't outperformed C.J. Stroud this season either. So,
but that's also why Josh McDaniels is out of a job too.
Oh, so is the GM. So.
Yes. Does it not all pair together? No, Justin, what I was going to say is, like, it is more than fair, and I'm not absolving Frank Reich of anything, but who played a role in – if we're talking about this guy being such a hands-on owner, forget all the reports and rumors about the Bryce Young selection. Even just forget – like, we're not even talking about that anymore. You hired the GM. You talked with the GM. Mm-hmm. You probably played a role in who the GM wanted to hire. You gave your blessing in some way, shape, or form. Like, I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm saying just in general, if we're going to talk about that Frank Reich is to blame here for, like, what he couldn't do in his time, let's also blame the guy who played, we believe, some sort of role here in also bringing the guy in. Like, this is where my point, where it's like, I think this is a situation where the players are last in the blame here. Like, everyone else has to come first. I just want to clarify that for the people. Like, in no way, shape, or form, I know you haven't been doing this. I'm just saying for the people, it's like the lowest thing on the total poll with the problems in Carolina is the players right now. It was clearly the coaching staff, which very deservedly. That's what the head coach has been axed. And now it's the dude that, like Rick said, they're going to be having to deal with this for 25 to 30 years of this guy just getting his hands involved in everything.
Can I ask a weird question now that I'm thinking about it?
But this show is called Sports Agents of Chaos. Yes, you can ask a weird question.
Remember in the beginning of the year when Frank Reich's daughter got hired to the marketing department in Carolina? You think she still has her job?
That's actually a good question.
Because the marketing for Carolina's been pretty good. The coaching hasn't been. The marketing's been okay. So maybe she still has a job. It's
like we have to type up the press release.
Oh, it's the reverse. Kirk Ferentz, he had to fire his son, the OC of Iowa. It's the reverse of that.
Frank Reich's daughter had to put up. Oh no! I mean, wait, wouldn't the PR department do that? Is she part of PR? Or just
she's marketing and PR. It's the same thing.
Oh Jesus! Oh no!
She had to.
That should be the case. Dang.
Maybe like, sorry,
Rick, check her LinkedIn. Can one of you check her LinkedIn and see if she's still employed?
Hey, well, we'll see.
Too much work.
It's a website. All right. Well, that being said, I think it's unanimous around this 3-person board, which is still somehow more. There's still more democracy here than there. Excuse me. Yes, there in this this 3-person and 1 puppet board. There's still somehow more democracy and more equal opinions than there was in the Carolina Panthers NFL decision-making room this entire time so far throughout the last 6 years. So, that being said, Carolina. Good luck? Question mark?
They should relegate them to the XFL.
If only.
Yeah.
If only. That would make it more interesting. Or now the merged XFL and USFL.
Well, considering Rodney Hatheny-Smart went to the Panthers after his XFL tenure, it makes sense.
And PJ Walker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Like XFL, Carolina Panthers.
Match made in heaven.
We should honestly see Carolina Panthers versus whoever wins the next season of the XFL/USFL.
Watch it be the Michigan Panthers. Panthers.
Oh my God! Yes, we have been waiting for this moment our entire lives.
There you go. That ties into mind-blowing fact. Panthers versus Panthers, same league.
Beautiful. Everything is tying in. We haven't even tried this episode. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. You love to see it.
It's great.
Oh Lord. Speaking of things that you love to see and hate to do in one person's case here, I'm talking about Billy Shakes, of course. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for this week's edition of the #SAOC Pick Challenge, where Rick, Justin, and I go around the slate of NFL games in a given week and pick pick winners of games that we believe will end up happening on a 4 to 1 point scale. 4 most confident, 1 least confident. We all must make at least one upset pick. Or actually, no. Let me rewind that. We all get these 4 selections throughout the slate of games with however many remaining games pending week by week go to the pirate, in this case, Billy Shakes. And we all get 4 picks. We all can make the picks in whatever order we want. Well, we go in a serpentine draft order that is all based off of what the points total is at this point of the season, which Rick will get to updating us on in a moment here. We all must go through the board and pick at least one upset pick for us. It can at minimum be your 2-pointer. It cannot be your 1-pointer. So it has to, at worst possible points odds, be your 2 points. And the lines are given to us by our friends at... He's muted. Rick, did you mute him? Okay.
ESPN bet. Sorry.
There we go. Good. I don't blame you, Justin. I think Billy Shakes took the
Caesar Sportsbook rolls off the tongue so much better than ESPN bet.
Yeah, I legally can't comment on that, but maybe it does. So that aside, along with us having the requirement, there is the requirement of the upset. There is a potential thing we want to do if we want to have a little bit of chaos here, and we all have the ability to pick a tie in a given week happening. The caveat is that the tie must be used only with your 4-point pick, but with accordance to that, you get an extra point for your 4-point pick. It becomes a 5-point pick if you do pick a tie and it hits, or just if you pick a tie in general. If it hits, yes, you get 5 points. And if you get a perfect week, I feel like I've neglected to say this for a little bit. So if you do get a perfect week, you get a +1 at the end of that point total. So imagine you get a tie and a perfect week in the same week. That's a 12-point week there, which has never happened in the show's history yet, by the way. So
we break the scale if that happened.
What if that actually did happen?
Should have happened.
Yeah. Get over it.
Sorry.
So. With that being said, Rick, please give us the 2023 point standings.
All right, so we had 13 games this week, including the Thursday night game. So we opted to give the Pirate the Thursday night game, and he hit with the Cowboys. Therefore, his point total went up to a meager 42. Jurg, you are in third place of the humanoid version of this pick challenge with 67 points. I am in second at 82, and Justin has continued to hold on to his lead that he acquired a couple weeks ago. He is at 86. So, Jurg will pick first, then me, Justin twice, and from there. This is week 13. There are some interesting games to select from. Some high favorites, some odd ones, and some games that looked a lot better in week 1 than they do in week 13. I'll tell you that much. So, with that in mind, Jurg, the floor is yours.
This is such an ugly week to get the first 4-point pick here. There's not a lot I'm excited about in this one. So with that being said, I actually I feel like we don't typically name them just because we don't care typically who has buys for the most part. But a couple solid teams have bye weeks this week. I think for this predominantly being the Baltimore Ravens are on a bye. I think, unless I'm mistaken, no.
Tommy Cutlets has a bye too. Tommy DeVito is on bye.
Yes. The Giants also have a bye. Unfortunately, the Patriots are playing this week, which there's that. And the Bills have a bye. Now, granted, I know it's been up and down, but the Bills have actually been competitive the last couple times, which maybe not next week, but the week after that, we will, like I mentioned at the start of the show, come back to the whole standings thing, because we mentioned the Bills going into, I think it was the Thanksgiving slate, or maybe even the week before that, about how big of a stretch this is for them. Going to be a team that we have we'll be looking at in terms of when we could consider picking them, and if we do, because it's tough for the Bills, to say the least. Now, that conjecture aside, my first pick for this week, I mean, this is a tough one.
Not really. There's an obvious choice that I think you should go with.
See, you say that, but despite the fact I've been making so many 4-point picks that I think in theory should be good, they're not.
Well, so, that's how I ended up in last place last year too. So there you go.
All right. This game wouldn't be available to me, honestly, by the time it rolls back to me. So I will go with, at my 4 points, I think this is the first time I've ever picked them with a 4-point pick, if Rick could double check on the math here.
Oh, yeah. Okay, what do you got?
This will be simple. Rick, for my 4-point pick this week, I'm going with the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Cardinals with my 4-point pick.
Let me see here.
I think this is a pretty easy confirmation, actually.
Pittsburgh. Well, there are a lot of weeks. So Pittsburgh. No, week 5, week 4. No, this is your first time picking Pittsburgh in the 4-point spot. So there you go. At least this year. I'm not sure if you did it last year, but
I don't think I did last year.
I don't know if you did. I think I did a couple times. I think Justin might have, but I don't know if you ever did. So you're going Pittsburgh over Arizona, which is interesting. It's a nice little Super Bowl rematch, which should be a lot of fun for that. I'm so glad you did that, though. I really am. Justin, I'm going to give you a very early Hanukkah gift. You're welcome. And Jurg, might be a very early Albanian Christmas gift for you because, as you guys know, I don't know. As you guys know, I make my picks prior to the season. Well, in looking at every game that I saw, I was like, okay, this is a win, this is a loss, this is a win, and I was like, what's that game? What did I do? And I don't know if you remember the AFC East and the AFC West prediction shows. Gentlemen, we're doing it. Chargers, Patriots, 5-point tie. We're doing it.
Wow.
This was the week.
Oh, he's right. No, he's actually right.
And you know what? You know what the best part about this too is?
Oh my
this
God.
game could actually end up in a tie. I looked at the ranks, and as good as the Chargers are on offense, that's how good the Patriots are on defense. And as bad as the Patriots are on offense, that's how bad the Chargers are on defense. We also have a lot of time, so I can kind of make up the difference as I go along here. But Mazel, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is in Albanian. Justin, this is for you. 5-point tie, Chargers, Patriots. Let's get weird. Let's have a 12-point week.
Oh, my goodness.
Guys, this is why I stay in the lead, because you gift me games.
Well,
every week. Look, I got to go with the easy ones. I'm going to take the Dolphins over the Commanders. And I'm going to take the Chiefs over the Packers.
See, I was thinking you were going to go with Miami over Washington, Jurg, as your first one there. So
I don't know why it wasn't showing up on my schedule. So
yeah, I
didn't get that game.
I
didn't see that game.
That's a fail on your part. Now, Justin. Here's what I'll say about the Chiefs and Packers. I don't know if you heard this stat, and this is a weird, wonky one. The Packers have not lost in December under Matt LaFleur.
The Packers also have never played a game without Aaron Rodgers.
Oh no, of course, but I'm just saying, like it's a very weird thing. That's not something you think about. That the Packers haven't lost a game with Matt LaFleur in December.
Not even last season.
No.
When was the last time that the Chiefs lost 2 games in a row?
Oh, 1943. I don't know, something like that. I don't know, but I think you're right. I think you're accurate on that end too. Well. So that kind of takes me out of the upset picks here, but I mean, I like doing this, guys. I like having a lot of fun with this. That's kind of why I enjoy myself here. I'm gonna go for a 3-point upset pick with the hottest team currently in the league right now.
Oh, I know.
And it's horrible of me to say that because like we all want this quarterback to go die at Burning Man and never come back. But give me the Broncos over the Texans at 3 points.
What a reference.
The Broncos have won 5 in a row. No, but seriously, the Broncos have won 5 in a row.
No, I know, but the reference is what caught us off guard.
But again.
He said, I hope this quarterback goes and dies at Burning Man. And I was like, Aaron Rodgers is not playing this week.
No,
that's who his enemy is.
Give it a couple weeks. But again, think about it like this. The Broncos, after their 70-point week where they allowed that to the Dolphins, they've allowed, 80 points over the last 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Against the Texans team that, let's be real here, last week is a deflating loss for that team.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be hard for them to get over that because they were 2 rotations of the football away from winning that game against the Jaguars. So, give me the Broncos at 3.
That's fair. All right. Speaking of the Jaguars, Rick, that's my 3-point pick. Excuse me. I almost skipped to the 2. No, that's my 3-point pick. This one. I think for the first time in a while, Justin's not the one picking the Monday night game, or at least you're not. I think this is the first Monday night game I picked in a little bit, so I got the Jaguars.
You have to actually, stay awake on Monday night to see the result of it, or
I mean, that's a little bit debatable. I don't necessarily.
That's what fair.
Okay, so that is my 3. With my 2, I'm just looking over the remaining slate of games and seeing my upsets here. See, I don't know if you would pick this game. No. See, because I don't like. I like how Rick doesn't like going against his preseason picks. I try not to disagree with the picks I make on my other podcast, which I'm still in first place for that, by the way.
Yeah. La-di-da.
Yeah, thanks.
That was a low blow to me, and it's fair because you low blow Justin all the time about the ties, so I gave him a grace period. So heap it all my direction. Let's go.
All right. I wasn't even taking a shot at you. Anyways.
I was still in first place in my league. Well, I had it for a while. I lost it.
That no, I was just saying because I'm happy about it.
Oh, okay. Good for you.
No,
Happiness is fleeting.
Didn't consider. All right. Well, ain't that the truth? Anyways, let's get on to the main stuff.
Sure.
There's only one game here that I actually like the definitive upset for, but the problem is that I picked the other team on my other podcast. So I guess either way, I'm right on one end or another. I guess I'll just go for it.
So you picked the Falcons and your other one, you're going for the Jets here.
100% not. No, give me the Eagles for my 2-point upset pick because San Fran is currently favored to win by 3. And I get it. Actually, on my other podcast, just for the sake of it, like my other two guys, Chris and Dame, and myself, we all picked the 49ers, actually. We all think San Fran is winning the game. So, I mean, either all three of us are wrong and I'm right here, or all three of us are right there and I guess I'm wrong here. So we'll see.
So how this game has lasted to 2 points, I'm not really sure, but the Lions need to bounce back. So give me the Lions over the Saints at 2. You know, this way I can ensure that I won't have a winless week and have to make a love sonnet to Adam Rank at the next episode. So give me the Lions.
Oh, is that your own 4 punishment? I forgot.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So wait, what's Justin's own 4 punishment?
I never came up with one.
He has to watch a full season of Digimon because you guys are so Pokemon centric.
That's not a punishment.
Been there, done that.
Oh well, okay then.
I was gonna say.
All right, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
There's nothing. I don't know. There's no punishment for me. I'm gonna say they burned me last week, but I'm gonna give them another shot. When they upset pick, I'm going to take the Browns over the Rams.
That's a good one.
That defense is just too good to not take a shot on.
And you know what that means, though, Justin? You're riding with Joe Flacco.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Joe Flacco.
Crazier things have happened.
Yes, I know.
Crazier things have happened. And then if that's the case, then I don't really have any other games that I want to pick.
But you have to.
I know I have to. They're all terrible. I'm not going to pick the Jets. So it's between the Colts and the Titans and the Panthers and the Bucks. I guess I'll take the Bucks, right?
Well, I was going to take I was going to take the Panthers because I thought the nice little but then they hired a special teams coach at the interim, and I was like, well, no, thank you. You know how well that works. In that vein, I will take the Colts over Tennessee and make Jurg decide between
Jurg. Who you
Arthur
got?
Smith and Tim Boyle.
All right, let me go. Who did I pick on the other pod? I need to refresh myself. What did I say? Wait, where's? Okay, I'm like, wait, did we not pick this game? It wouldn't have surprised me if we actually would have forgotten. No, we did. This is a case where I actually will just stay consistent with what I was doing before. I 100% see the fact that I could get this wrong, and I will be wrong on both of these with what I'm going. Yes, I see the humor in that. Ha ha, hardy har har. Do I stick with my guns on this one? I don't like the Falcons.
Well, Jurg, let me just remind you of something. What do I always say when I get to this point? It's 1 point. What does it matter? Go with whatever.
Falcons.
As I say, don't think about it. The more you think about 1 point games, the more your life is ruined.
My life's already been ruined long before this, Rick.
Well, this is fair. And when you watch me get a 12-point week, then it'll be even worse for you. Stuff, you know.
Hey, I'm rooting for you here, man.
Hey, we said it was going to happen, and the only realistic person that had a shot was me. Justin gave it an effort, but I also picked a tie last season with Philadelphia and Washington, and one of you guys sold that game before me, which is whatever. So I had the opportunity, so I took it now. And that being said, here is what's happening this week. Billy's game's already been picked. He already won, so he's fine. Jurg at 4 points, Pittsburgh over Arizona. At 3 points, Jacksonville over Cincinnati. At 2 points, Philadelphia over San Francisco, which is your upset pick. And at 1 point, Atlanta over the Jets. Myself, 5 points. Feels weird to say that, but 5 points. Chargers, Patriots end up in a draw with bad weather in New England, bad quarterback play, and bad defenses. And after that game, 2 coaches will get fired, but not the head coach, but somebody else will get fired probably. Let's just be real about that here. 3 points, Denver over Houston, which actually qualifies as another upset, believe it or not. 2 points Detroit over New Orleans, and 1 point Indianapolis over Tennessee. Justin, our fearless leader in the clubhouse, Miami over Washington at 4, Kansas City over Green Bay at 3, your upset pick of Cleveland over the Rams at 2, and Tampa Bay over Carolina at 1. It's week 13. So we got 5 more weeks to go of this. So it still really does feel like it's anybody's pick challenge. You know?
I mean, it's mainly you two. The only chance I have is I gotta rip off 2 or 3 perfect weeks in a row, and then I'm back in it.
Well, I also did give you a gift with a 5-pointer because if you go perfect this week, you'll go up to 78. So it's the little engine that could, as I always say, slowly but surely.
Hey, look, comeback stories have to start from somewhere, boys.
Yes, they do.
It may just not ever start at all, but we'll see.
Speaking of comeback stories. You would think that Duncan would have a comeback story here, but they don't because Duncan sucks. You would think that James Harden would have a comeback story here, but he doesn't because he's overrated. But the comeback stories of the Rant and Rick's Roshan podium, they don't really have a place here because why would I rant about a comeback story that's really good? This is about things that are terrible and things that I just want to talk about. Number 3. They are in the Big Ten championship game today. They do not belong there in the Big Ten championship game today. And that would be the Iowa Hawkeyes, who seem to forget how to throw a forward pass and play football. Let's be honest here. This is basically going to be a 70-0 drubbing. And that is not a good representation of a league who, by the way, next year is welcoming in USC, Oregon, and Washington, et cetera from there. That your championship game is Michigan versus Iowa. Yeah, I'd rather see Rutgers play in this instead. They'd lose by 50 instead of 70, but this would be more entertaining. Number 2 on my rant podium list, the state of Kansas. Now, every so often, states decide to revamp something that really doesn't really need to be revamped for one reason or another. And the majority of them do it with license plates. If you recall way back when, the New York license plate was the red, white, and blue that had the Statue of Liberty in the middle. Why we ever went away from that in New York, I don't know, but we did. So Kansas decided, let's revamp our license plate, and here's what we're going to go with. So they went with a black license plate, or that was navy blue, black license plate with yellow letters. Can anyone tell me what border school for the state of Kansas uses those colors that might cause an issue with Kansas residents? The University of Missouri? So, blessed be the ties that bind, but in the border war, ain't no ties that bind. Kansas, this is why politicians and businessmen shouldn't be involved in sports, because you don't understand things. You don't get it, If you're trying to make a joke about this sort of thing, or you're trying to do a highlight thing, it's like, well, we Kansans, we know that we're trying to get better at it, but we'll submit and have someone design it. Well, okay, here's a bright idea. Look around you. If you're using colors that are from your hated rival, this would be basically like the quintessential thing of Alabama's license plate being orange and green like Florida. Why would you do that? Get a rise out of everybody, I suppose, but other than that, why? And speaking of getting a rise, number 1 on this list, Justin, avert your ears, because this is close to getting me to swear, but I'm not going to. However, this is about a former member of your current team and my former team. Jamal Aloysius D. Nozzle Adams. This is why context on X and on social media is so very important. Connor Hughes, the SNY reporter, retweeted the video of Jalen Ferguson's touchdown catch from Thursday, to which somebody else on X said, it looks like Jamal Adams' control froze and he was a second too late when he made his move, and just said the word yikes, which could be interpreted as that's a great catch by Ferguson. Could be, but there's no context to it. And Jamal Adams retweets a photo of Connor Hughes and his wife with the word yikes. All I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to step into the foray here, and I thought about retweeting Jamal Adams and saying this to him. Your mama raised you better, Jamal Adams, And yeah, I'll come after your mama when I say that. Because you know how basically everyone's so prideful about, don't talk about my mama. I'm talking about your mama. What? This is why people we need to take a class on thinking before we speak and thinking before we fire off a tweet. It's so interesting that our brains are so conditioned to just fire something off with our thumbs so quickly, whereas we were taught when we were younger, take your time and think before you speak. I do want to say the full verbiage of the D in the D nozzle, but if I'm talking about it like a body wash, like using the French term for body wash, gel, the other one, I probably can't say it because the context is still the same. It's not the worst swear word in the world, but it's up there. And that's what you are, Jamal Adams. You are a giant D nozzle, a giant gel D. Get out of the gutter. Be respectful to people. And don't double down on your totally inaccurate and totally wrong comments. I get to do that because I'm right in my opinion that Duncan sucks. I'm right. That's just how it is. I'm correct. I'm right. You're wrong. That's how we go from there. I get to do that with James Harden because, let's be real here, he's overrated. James Harden on the Pistons would actually make them a worse team than they currently are right now, and they didn't win a game in November. Just saying. I'm also right when I say that, and I'm going to leave it at this because I know Jerk's going to get really angry. NASCAR's better than F1. I'm sorry. Bye, friends.
Lies. I do like the new image, though. Lies. We will discuss this off stage, off mic. We might need to issue a punishment or a suspension on Rick. Justin, I think I think we may need to make him send some sort of love letter after all, because that will not be abided here on this program, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very abrupt end to the Sports Agency.
I do also just want to say one quick thing too, just so because I also watched one of our old episodes too, and I made you angry when I said Justin Tucker will miss a kick wide right, and I think he has this year. So I'm just telling you that.
Banned from the show for the rest of this episode, good sir. So this is an abrupt end to the Sports Agents of Chaos. Blasphemy has been said. Rick is teetering on a fine line here, ladies and gentlemen. So as we complete episode number 85 off, please be sure to tune in on next week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Will the Carolina Panthers issues ever be resolved? Probably not. What will the standings be this time next week? What other discussions will we be having as we head closer to the end of the season? Because, guys, it's winning time here, not just for our hashtag SAOC Pick Challenge, but also just for the NFL in general. Who are going to be the surprise wildcard teams we will get? Will anyone win a surprise division? And what are the playoff matchups going to be? We're going to find out and discuss that in the coming weeks right here on the podcast that is here for fun, football, and chaos. Take care, everyone. We'll see all of you. You'll see all of us. The three of us, well, maybe three next week, depending on the behavior of a certain individual here. You'll see us next week.